A success of your painting, a lot of it is actually rooted in proper preparation. You might figure out the composition, try out a few options, think about the colors, mix some on the palette in advance if that's a part of your process, lay out your brushes, materials, think things through. It can take a bit of time to prepare, but it can really set you up for success later on, especially thinking about and experimenting with the colors you plan to use before diving into your painting. I see this as a part of creating a strong foundation. Colors are not just about aesthetics, they shape the entire mood and message of your artwork. So I'd like to go deeper into this topic today. I have quite a bit of experience with this subject, and I feel like it's time to make a comprehensive video that aims at helping you become a lot more confident when it comes to choosing and working with colors, and I'll also share some other things here that I find worthwhile to include. I usually have the colors I'd like to use in mind, or a color combination going into each particular work based on my personal preferences, the mood I want to create, the overall concept, and what I found works best. Like, I may think about the complementary colors. That's a great starting point. Complementary colors are the ones on the opposite ends of the color wheel, like purple and yellow, blue and orange, red and green. They can create beautiful color harmonies. When I studied architecture, we had a color theory class that covered how color is used, how colors interact, and how they affect mood and spatial experience. And a few of the main takeaways for me were how to use the color wheel and identify best color combinations, and how to create balanced, appealing color harmonies. The fundamental ones would be using analogous colors, the ones that sit side by side on the color wheel, such as, let's say, orange, light orange, and yellow. It's basically using variations of similar colors with different intensities. There is a complementary color scheme. That's the one I already brought up before, and I'm sure a lot of you already know about this one. Now, a split complementary is where, instead of using the direct opposite color, we add the two colors adjacent to it. For example, violet, yellow-orange, and yellow-green. And what you may not know, and I'm not sure where I learned about it, it's been a while, but it's wise to use some of them in a more toned-down pastel form, helping a single vivid color stand out, creating a saturated accent. In practice, this way colors work harmoniously together without overpowering each other. Next, we have a triadic color scheme that uses three colors that are evenly spaced around the wheel, like a triangle. For example, red, yellow, and blue. These color combinations are often quite bold and vibrant. And there are more like monochromatic color scheme and tetradic, but I rarely think of these ones. Though I will say more about choosing one dominant color, where it's not going to be a completely monochromatic painting, but one color will set the tone. It can bring out a certain response. Let's say you choose yellow or like a green color, which can often be associated with nature, maybe calm or balance. Red, on the other hand, was something powerful. I'm using some broad examples here, but artists across all fields, designers, filmmakers, painters may use it to their advantage as a tool. For example, a music artist may choose a predominant color for an album and imagery that's going to show up again and again as a way to communicate certain ideas and feelings, aid storytelling. A color can carry a strong meaning, and we shouldn't underestimate it. By the way, just as a side note, I've been incorporating oil pastels into my painting process more and more. It can be a quick way to add color and or lay down a sketch. I've been loving this, and if you're wondering whether it's okay to mix the two to use it with oil paint, the answer is yes, absolutely. They both are oil-based, so it doesn't create any issues unless you start with a very thick layer of oil pastels, for example. Don't do that. Also, keep in mind that they don't fully dry and can smudge, but these are the things you'll learn very quickly by working with them. I like using them early on and way later in the process to quickly add a pop of color, for example, small color accents, or to even add some texture that can look similar to dry brushing, or even draw something with them over a dry paint layer, like patterns, some expressive lines, whatever the painting may need. So generally, color schemes are a helpful guide, but I wouldn't recommend relying on them all the time. Ultimately, it really comes down to your own preferences and style. For some artists, the colors they use become almost defining to their style, something people recognize right away. Color theory helps us harmonize colors, explains how they interact and how certain color combinations work and are perceived by our eyes, but there are no strict rules when it comes to your art. You can do whatever feels right for your own work, and I really stand by that. Sometimes you just need a place to start, and I think some basics of color theory are a good place to do so. By the way, I'm focusing on more traditional looks, if you will. Some modern work uses very intense, variegated color combinations, but it's not something I can speak to much, since in my work I focus on figurative and realistic styles and more classical approaches. Though, almost as an opposite to using lots of colors in their pure, fully saturated form, something I've seen happens a lot is people mute their colors, thinking it will feel more harmonious. But when you do that, you're basically narrowing the scope in terms of chroma, and even though it might work in some cases, what might end up happening is you inadvertently doing the opposite and making your colors seem muddy and bland. The painting will not look as interesting or expressive, maybe gloomier. It creates a different mood, obviously, and unless that's something you're going for, like I said, it might just look muddy. So it's usually not a great solution to make your colors match this way. I've made a similar mistake when I tried to introduce more green color into my paintings because honestly, I don't like very vibrant greens. I much prefer softer tea greens or sage greens when they're on their own, but they would break the whole harmony of the painting or paintings I was working on. So I had to switch to brighter, richer greens, and that looked great with the other colors I was using and do use oftentimes. So a proper color use isn't about individual color preferences, it's about how everything works together. The best approach I've found is having some idea of the colors you want to go with, the harmony or at least the direction you want to take, and then choosing a few color accents that will be more chromatic. These can highlight your focal point, draw attention to areas you want to emphasize, or guide the viewer's eye across the painting. It's particularly useful composition-wise, and when you paint backgrounds or how you set up a still life, for example, you want to place some brighter color accents to help the eye move through the painting. So don't be afraid to use bolder, more energetic colors as well as needed. You can have a more neutral base with these vibrant accents. I think this approach is very beautiful. Use color palettes or images and photos you like for inspiration. If something clearly works there and it's very appealing to you, why not use it as a base or inspiration for your own work? So these are a few of my tips. Let me give you a few examples of color use. This painting, for example, is completely built on a triadic color scheme, specifically blue, red, and little yellow lights. This one relies on a purple and yellow complementary color scheme. Take a look. Now, quick setting the atmosphere examples. These have a more calm color feel with a dominant brown, earthy color palette, beige, yellows, a sunny atmosphere. I often balance that with cool blue tones, which is a really like a classic approach. A great landscape example of it would be this Monet's painting that nicely contrasts cool blues and warm sunlight. Here are a few paintings by both classic masters and contemporary artists, and the colors used, kind of like a breakdown. I'll show each one alongside some color swatches so you can see how the palette works. I wanted to include a little bit of everything, but yeah, just a few examples. A small set of artworks from the artists I like. I find it quite fun to, analyze the color choices, so that's that. Now, I've been looking at this from the perspective of overall color palette, but I haven't talked about colors for portraiture yet. I get asked about this a lot, how to make portraits and skin tones look more realistic. I go into this in more detail in some of my other videos, but let me touch on the main things you need to focus on. It really comes down to getting your values and hues right. Just a quick reminder, value is basically how light or dark a color is, the relative brightness ranging from white to black. When a portrait looks flat or kind of cartoony, it's usually because the values are off. Hue refers to the color itself, like red, blue, green, yellow. Since we're already going through some definitions, the way you describe the intensity of a color is called chroma, or sometimes people refer to it as saturation. A color with high chroma is vibrant and pure, while low chroma colors are more muted, closer to gray. Think bright red versus a dull muted red. Our skin has so many different hues. It isn't just one unified tone. It can have hints of green, yellow, red, blue. If you want a general rule of thumb, cheeks and nose tend to be pinker, more red. The forehead is usually cooler in tone. The area around the inner corners of the eyes can lean towards blue, purple, and the area around the mouth can be more yellow or even slightly blue or green, especially for men who might have very light facial hair that's not really visible, but it slightly shifts the hue in some skin tones. I actually made a few videos on color mixing and skin tones over on my Patreon. Look at the general undertone of the skin and notice how lighting affects it. Remember that usually if we have warm light, these shadows are going to be cooler and vice versa. Cool light creates warmer shadows. Always look at your reference or your subject, the model if you're painting from life. Don't sort of invent colors when the information, the answer is right in front of you. Compare values. Squinting your eyes is a good method. It helps to simplify details and see value relationships more clearly. Pay attention to subtle hue shifts like we talked about, create a variety of tones, and you'll do great. Additionally, I will say if you struggle with muddy colors, it's most likely because you're overworking the painting or overblending. When you place cleaner, more accurate marks from the start and keep them, which is equally as important, you'll notice how much richer and more beautiful your colors look. For cleaner transitions between light and dark areas, try placing an intermediary color instead of blending the two together. It's nicer, it gives you more control over the hue, and helps avoid that dull, lifeless look that can happen with too much blending. I think this is a really useful thing to keep in mind. Also pay attention to creases like eyelid folds or other areas like that. They are usually warmer and more red in hue because of how the light passes through the skin. In many cases, it illuminates those areas, shifting the hue towards red. Okay, we've covered a lot. The painting you see me working on a lot today is called Spring Air, 50 by 70 centimeters, around 20 by 28 inches in size. I added some marks with oil pastels at the end there too, kind of like those color accents we talked about to enhance vibrancy and to support that sense of movement like a breeze or a wind. It's a thicker 3D canvas, so I decided to embellish the sides with gold leaf, and I think it turned out well. At the end of the day, don't get too hung up on using just the right colors or following a specific method or a scheme or any of those other things. Let the painting take you where it wants to go, create, and keep practicing because you get better and better with every piece of work. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.